It comes naturally to us. Unstoppable energy. We share it. We use it to live better. Longer, smarter. We are manifesting a green and sustainable future. Sustainability is not just our passion, but a pledge. As we realize the potential of our people, we make a promise that we are thinking of tomorrow. NGC, pursuing sustainability at the forefront of energy.
Welcome to Good Energy News. My name is Katija Ross and I will be speaking to you about energy, specifically renewable energy and energy efficiency. So let's power into it. Firstly, renewable resources. What are renewable resources? Well, renewable resources are resources that are replaced naturally over time. The use of these resources is sustainable because we can consume them at a rate which does not deplete them in the long term. This type of energy, theoretically, never runs out, and it has many advantages. Sustainable energy produces little or no waste products, so there is a minimal impact on the environment, and it can bring economic and social benefits. However, there are some disadvantages. Its disadvantages are that flooding and environmental damage to an area is sometimes necessary in order to build hydroelectric power plants, which can have negative long-term impacts. Some renewable energy projects, like solar farms and wind turbine farms, can cause visible pollution since they can take up large amounts of land area. Of course, a weather-dependent power supply can be unpredictable and inconsistent. And finally, this type of energy source often requires high initial investment. Now, types of renewable energy include solar power, which uses energy from the sun, and photovoltaic technology to convert that solar radiation into electric energy. There's also wind energy, wave energy, tidal energy, ocean thermal and geothermal energy, biofuels, and hydropower. Now, non-renewable energy resources are available in finite amounts. More than that, these resources cannot be replaced by natural means at a rate that meets consumption. Fossil fuels such as oil are non-renewable resources. In other words, if we keep using them, they will eventually run out. The main energy sources used for power in the Caribbean are fossil fuels, especially oil and natural gas. Fossil fuels come from organic matter, which have been trapped between layers of sediment within the earth for millions of years. Organic matter, typically plants, have decomposed and compressed over time, leaving what are known as fossil fuel deposits. These deposits are highly combustible, making them a great source of power. They're typically retrieved through drilling or mining, which is a difficult process. Examples of non-renewable energy resources are crude oil, natural gas, and coal. These supplies will eventually run out, and they have a high environmental impact, especially in the context of climate change. And climate change is, well, a scientific phenomenon occurring as a result of too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which traps heat and causes global temperatures to rise. In turn, this causes glaciers to melt, sea levels to rise, and more frequent and intense storms and other results that can make living on Earth, more challenging. In Trinidad and Tobago, the export and use of fossil fuels is an important contributing factor to the GDP. But fluctuating prices have highlighted the risk of long-term fossil fuel dependence. And now we're going over to our on-location correspondent, Jalan, who will be speaking about energy conservation at home. So let's see. Jalan.
Energy conservation at home. Now, there are many things that you can do to stop wasting energy at home. And no, I'm not just talking about taking a break from TikTok or stop playing video games and all that. It is actually possible for you to not only save energy, but help protect the environment. Power down. Turning off your monitor and getting rid of your screensaver is a great option for you to save some energy, which won't impact your computer. So, turn it down. Eliminate vampire electronics. Many electrical devices, if left plugged in when not in use, can be sucking up your electrical energy. Scanners, printers, and even fans, for example, use standby power. So, unplug when not in use. By using a power strip, you could easily flip the switch on multiple devices. Light right. LED lights are an efficient way to light up your life, since they typically use 75% less energy than regular incandescent bulbs, and they last longer as well. And turn off your lights, people. When you are leaving an empty room, there is no need for you to leave the lights on. So, turn it off, please. Come on. Back to you, Katisha.
Yes. Thank you, Jalan. That probably, you used a lot of energy to do that. You get it? Energy is an essential part of our lives and impacts every aspect of our lives. It's through energy that everything is made possible in today's world. From industries to individuals, good choices need to be made about how we source and use energy so that our future and the future of the next generations can be brighter. And that's it. That really drained my energy. You get it? Oh, okay, I hope you can match the energy of this presentation. You get that one? That one was really good though. Anyways, remember to stay bright, and Khadija out.
It comes naturally to us, unstoppable energy. We share it. We use it to live better. We are manifesting a green and sustainable future. NGC, pursuing sustainability at the forefront of energy.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to the closing night event for the 12th edition of the Green Screen Environmental Film Festival. It feels like it was only just a few short days ago that we were launching the festival. Now we are at closing night. And my name is Ardeen Suju, and I'm just here to take you through the two main events. And we have the Live Nice panel, which will start shortly. And then following that, we'll have the award ceremony for the very short shorts mobile film competition, so stay tuned for that. But just to set us off this evening, we are going to be viewing a very interesting and compelling short film out of Kenya. It's called Believer's Garden, and it shows the result of a tremendous community effort to transform the environmental landscape of Kenya's largest dump site. And for those of us in Trinidad and Tobago, I think we may take an extreme measure of interest in this, and maybe in other parts of the region too. Do enjoy.
Gani unataka nikushikie? Nenda juu. In Dandora, it used to be a World Bank project, which was done back in 1978. So they were those spaces that were left for the community. Believer's Garden, it used to be a dump site. Then idea came up, why don't we transform this space into clean, green, and safe spaces for the community? So in the entire Dandora, this is the tallest building. Tunaita ghorofa 7. 7th floor, no lift. Unaenda na stairs. Inaitwa ghorofa 7. The tallest in the entire Dandora neighborhood. Class 3, I lost my parents, both of them. So reaching class 5, who was taking care of me when my parents died, it was my grandmom. Unfortunately, when I was in class 5, she also passed away. So at class 5, I started living on my own with my brother and my little sister. We started surviving at class 5. Reaching class 8, my bro also passed on. From class 8, so I was alone with my sister. So in Form 1, I had a aunt who told me that he will try to organize for me a secondary school. He bought for me the things that I needed for the school, but when we reached term 3, he couldn't continue to pay for me my school fees. So when we were growing up, those people that we were looking up to, they were criminal. So that is how I found myself in crime. I used to do crime, go and pay my school fees, take care of my sister. That is how I used to survive. I've seen a lot of youth being killed when we were with them in a robbery mission. I have passed a lot with the lynching, robbery, mob justice, a lot of them, like 5 times. I was thinking that I was going to die. Then I remember the last robbery, the last one I did, then I left crime, was when we were in a robbery mission with my 3 friends. Just immediately after the robbery, when we went to a broker, the person who we used to sell the phone to, little did we know that the community, the mob justice, were following us in behind. So I just felt like going to release myself. When I just left there to go and release myself, little did I heard that the hour my friend were beaten up, they were lynched. Then I had another one saying, "Hata walikuwa na ule." Then I started running. I couldn't sleep that night. I tried sleeping, there was none. I was just puking, didn't know what was happening. One of my friends told me that, "Evans, you are being searched because it has been noticed that you were in a robbery." So that is when I had to run from here to go to Madare so that people can know that I don't exist anymore. That is when I go for a soul search. And I decided that why don't I just leave crime and just start something. That is how I started digging the drainages. With time, the land grabbers started grabbing this land and building on them. Like for instance, when I was starting here, after just removing all the dump here, someone offered me 1.5 million to leave this space so that he can build a tall building. I refused. Then they started telling me, are you mad? How can you refuse 1.5 million that you want to plant grass and trees? What will you eat grass and trees? But me, I'll tell them, no, this place we are going to transform it for the community. If we go there in dam site, what makes me happy is that part of the dam site, there are youth who have started transforming part of the dam site. You'll see a green space in dam site. That gives me a hope that really this journey we are going, and it is not only me, we are going with a lot of youths. I have hope that this is the generation that is going to finish the dam site there. If we talk about the government, they will never do it. I know it is only our generation that can bring change. People perceive me as a transformer in the community because through this initiative, I've been able to show a lot of youths the way to leave crime and start something that will be a benefit to our community. And I'm also a father to the young generation who are coming. At least I have to show them a good example that this is what we are supposed to do in our hood. In Dandora, we never had gardens. So if you're telling people that we are going to make a garden, people are saying, what is garden? Huyu mtu ni nini anasema? Considering I was in crime. So the idea which came to me was that I was going to use the things that people consider waste in the environment. They are the things that we are going to use as raw material. Along the way, the youth started seeing, oh, so that is what Evans was doing. But not all of them came up with, because when we talk about change, change is a process, not an event. It is something that before you see it, it takes time. These spaces, it brings people together. It unites the people. It unites different cultures, okay? Because through these spaces, I have a lot of people that I met through these spaces. If I didn't have started this transformation, then I could not have met them. This project, I call it the community-led initiative. Each community have a role to play. This is a home. It's a home to animals, and it's also a home to human beings. And the best way to assist us is to make sure that this gospel of transformation reach as many people as possible in this world, like the seats that I'm using. So for example, someone has a car. Where do you take your old tire? You throw it away or you burn it. When you burn it, that smoke goes to the environment. What do you think it happens to the environment? It is a seat that will be here even 20 years to come. Nothing will happen to this seat. The rain comes, fall on it, and it is nothing. The only thing that you do, maybe with the time, you just come and you repaint it. A very comfortable seat. The transformation of the space starts with the transformation of the mindset. So if we can only transform the mindset and put it in the right perspective, that we also need to live in a clean, green, and a safe spaces, then we will win the war on environmental matters.
Believer's Garden there, coming out of Kenya. The director of that short film is Mr. Simon M.Y. And it's an inspiring one, I think, really moving for anybody interested in the power of community action and the ability of well, first of all, the power of your mindset and the ability to change one's life, especially away from a life of crime. And again, I think that's something that could resonate with many of us, given our own lived realities here in the Caribbean. I think that's a great way to get us started as we talk about living nice on this panel that's coming up now. I just want to take the opportunity to welcome everyone who's joining us across the various platforms on Facebook, on YouTube. Welcome to you all. It is our closing event, and it's great to have you here with us. We expect a very spirited, interesting conversation here led by our panelists. And I should introduce you to them. And again, the name of the panel is Live Nice, and it focuses on the Sustainable Development Goal 11, from, well, the UN SDGs, and that is sustainable cities and communities. And we'll be talking a lot about what that looks like in the Caribbean in particular. And to help us have that conversation, we'll be hearing from Amilcar Sanatan, who is an academic, artist, activist. He's also currently the project coordinator of various socioeconomic projects working with the East Development Company of Port of Spain here in Trinidad and Tobago. Joining us also from Egypt, we have Christiane Zakour. I think she made that trip not very long ago, and I'm really excited to hear what she's doing so far at COP27. Yes, she's out there attending, and in her capacity as an environmental advocate who works with the TNT Climate Association. Christiane, you will correct me, yes, when you have the opportunity to speak. And it's just great to have one of our very own young people, of course, at COP27, just covering the conversations and following the conversations and bringing them live to us here. And finally, we have joining us from Jamaica, Senator the Honorable Matthew Samuda, who is known for his role in leading the ban on single-use plastics in that country. His current portfolio is with the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. So quite a diverse and qualified panel we have here to talk with us about sustainable cities and communities. So I want to start by inviting each of our panelists to just give a little bit of their take on this question and how it relates to the work that you do. Amilcar, I'd like to start with you.
Thank you very much, Dean, and it's a pleasure to be here with yourself, Matthew, and Christian to think about Live Nice, which reminds me a lot of the Latin American concept of buen vivir, to think about that good living and the idea of collective development and rights-based approaches. So climate injustice really illustrates the vulnerabilities of specific nation states, but also communities and social groups. And today I would look a little bit at the historically marginalized groups, the people who are either left behind or left out of development, and seeing how they are worst off during the climate crisis. And I would love to give more attention to the high need working class urban communities throughout the Caribbean and Americas, put them in focus and see what possibilities can emerge from the work that is happening there.
Thank you very much for that, Amilcar. Christiane, we'll go to you next. And I just want to say that I believe it's TNT Climate Network that you're representing, that you co-lead, yes?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I'm also the administrative lead and eco-blogger at Human Stories and the project officer at Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance. And I also operate online through the UNEP Major Group of Children and Youth and the Lost and Damaged Youth Coalition. As young people, we have to wear many hats if we want to make a change. And that's just the direction I took. When I think about Live Nice, I think about the infrastructure and the systems that have to take place for us to be able to live, in a way that. Sorry. Could you just repeat the question?
No, I was just asking you to give your take on the SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities.
Right. So I admit I'm not an expert in SDG 11, but I am a believer in sustainable development and using the goals as a framework to get there. And when thinking about SDG 11, I'm concerned with our transport systems. So I'm actually in the process of writing a story to be published on Global Voices, looking at cycling fatalities in Trinidad in relation to our our transport networks. So how much do I have 3 minutes to talk, or just give a brief?
That's fine. Yeah, I think that overview is good, and in terms of your interest and the many hats that you wear, Christiane. So thanks for putting that into context for us. Senator Samuda.
Back to you.
Well, I don't know how formal you want to be. Do you mind if I call you Matthew?
That's fine.
Okay, great.
I'm happy to live nice with you all this evening. So it's a pleasure to join you all. Very diverse, interesting panel. Everybody has, I think, different frames of reference, and I think that will benefit the discussion. The ministry that I actually work in is actually the Prime Minister's ministry. and it subsumes the issue of water, environment, climate change. For me, the blue economy and the green economy is also a part of my portfolio. But outside of that, we also have the issue of housing, works, logistics, which has our Port Authority and Factories Corporation, and indeed urban renewal. So this is a topic that I think is very central to the work that I have been assigned, certainly on the water and environment side. The reality is SDG 11 speaks to our lived experience in Kingston and St. Andrew, right in the center of capital Jamaica, the capital of Jamaica, rather. Jamaica is, like the rest of the Caribbean, largely a coastal environment. We all live within a very close proximity of the coast. So in the Jamaican experience, it's 70% of the population living in very densely populated towns and cities littered across the low-lying areas around the coastline. Now, we haven't developed the way that we should. There's historical, cultural issues coming out of post-slavery, where persons were turned off of estates and sent to live wherever they could find space. It has led to mass squatting, mass land grab in Jamaica, as it has in other spaces in the developing world. And through that, the persons moved to as close proximity as they could to your two urban centers, really Kingston and St. Andrew and Montego Bay and St. James. So your southeast and your northwestern poles tend to be where the greatest amount of urbanization took place. Now, these areas are also on the front line of the climate crisis. So on top of all the other developmental challenges which are subsumed in SDG 11, we're also on the brink of climate departure in Kingston and St. Andrew. So 1.3 million of our 2.8 million persons are within 5 kilometers of the sea, pretty much about 5 to 8 meters above sea level for most persons. And, we're running out of time. So the issue of living nice and thriving, I think we first have to deal with the issue of how we're going to survive. So I look forward to dealing with that and with a touch of the traditional development issues later on when I'm able to speak.
Thank you very much, Matthew, and to Amilcar and Christian as well. I think a good place to start is for us to define or maybe paint a picture as to what sustainability in respect of cities and communities, what that looks like in the Caribbean. Because many times when we talk or when we hear talk about sustainable cities and communities in the context of the global north, we're talking about, European or American cities and communities and infrastructure related to green spaces, technology, climate resilience, etc. But for us in the Caribbean, Matthew, you talked about urban spaces, so did you, Amilcar. But what do you think ideally that would look like when we talk about sustainability, especially with our historical baggage? Amilcar, I don't know if you want to jump in to begin.
I wanted to respect the parliamentary order and make sure that the senator go first,
Oh gosh, no, there's no parliamentary order here.
There's no problem, but let me just give 2 minutes now. I'll go quick. One of the things, and I actually do appreciate what Matthew had proposed with understanding the historical context and what Christian was speaking to about the urgency that is felt by the youth, is that coming from plantation economies, many of us are actually descendants of people who would have worked in it. We understand what that violence to the environment means, the indignity associated with human labor, and the struggle we would have with even our lifestyles. I'm talking about health as well. So the violence to the environment, the plantational side that existed, gives us a historical lesson to really gives us the challenge that we could engineer a certain type of society and economic future. In the context of urban development sustainably, how could we advance that framework? We have to first involve people in the decision-making process of how they want their right to the city, as the French geographer would have said, Lefebvre. So urban planning approaches in the Port of Spain Development Company, we conceptualize our area into urban villages, which is to acknowledge the assets of informal networks, understanding the role of families and social spaces. But I think there are 3 areas where we have been seeing some interesting innovations and development, which is fundamentally rooted in the idea of the basic needs, support, assistance that people need in these communities. One would be the areas of urban agriculture, seeing the role of small agricultural plots, food gardens, as well as animal husbandry. Of course, that is connected to the issue of land rights, right? And the land ownership, right? Which is many people who live in these communities have claims, but they don't have property themselves. So land tenure becomes a dynamic involved with that. And second issue would be disaster risk management. Rain falls for 6 months of the year here. We have a rainy season, but we may not have planned our societies to be sensitive to our geography. So when rain falls, we have landslides, we have the destruction of the biodiversity, soil quality issues. We have pollution, plastic pollution when people drink alcohol sometimes, and waste disposal problems at the community level. So we have to sometimes unwork these entrenched social attitudes around managing waste and developing better community infrastructures for it. But disaster risk management has been a little bit more received in the environment today. And the last one would be looking at solar energy and low-income housing. Do I think that is part of climate justice? I don't know. I think people had informal connections all the time for electricity. The solar energy is the way you maintain your television and your phone. Well, if that is where the point is, we could do some more work around what solar energy would do and reduce the risk associated with informal connections that people run for entire communities, which is a fire hazard, a risk to the children, and of course, really undermines what the state is trying to do to provide basic utilities.
Thank you very much, Amilcar, for that very rooted experience in East Port of Spain. Christian, your thoughts on sustainable cities and communities in the Caribbean?
I don't think I could be so worthy as Amilcar. I would feel quite inadequate next to him after that. I would recognize that our view of sustainability tends to be mirroring what is being done in developed countries, which is not a path we should take because we have our own cultures, our own histories, and our own experiences to fall back on. So I would just say to respect the traditions that we have here already, to make use of them instead of trying to copy what is being done in other countries. So that's what I have to say.
What are some of the projects, perhaps, Christian, that through the various networks to which you belong, you have seen really produce something of note, something that could perhaps be replicated somewhere else?
I'm sorry to disappoint you, but as you asked that, my brain just went blank.
Is it that it's okay? So I imagine that you have a lot of experience working with different groups of people, different audiences, and I'm just curious about how your messaging has landed with those audiences, and what do you find has worked?
What works is finding the common ground, what people are able to understand, instead of speaking down to them. There is a respect that you have to have when you're communicating with people and when you're trying to understand them.
And what are some of those issues that have emerged as that common ground, providing that common ground for that kind of, for any kind of action to be taken?
I think perhaps I could pass this question to Amilcar to answer.
No man. But I would say it's quite interesting. Because the work that Christian would be doing in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, but in the Caribbean, the environmental or ecological justice movement has been quite powerful. And you would believe some of the most interesting changes are coming from countries like Belize, where land border disputes and understanding the coastal situation, which are very much rooted in geopolitical debates. Young people have done some impressive work. So it would seem as if they're just trying to protect turtles or eco-life or the issue of sargassum that is happening as we see in the Eastern Caribbean. But there has been very important work where we see entrepreneurship coming around of the deleterious effects around climate change. Some young people are actively involved now with creating products and raising awareness about protecting the environment. So the sargassum is being used for soaps and so on. And now environmental health and safety, I'm seeing a shift in what the university is teaching to introduce the issues of climate justice and how can corporations be more compliant to more green approaches to doing the work. So yes, you're drinking rum and enjoying your Friday, but having that consciousness about plastic pollution and ensuring we have environmental baseline in our corporations has been much more embraced, and I'm happy to see young people be very much a part of those conversations.
Thanks a lot, Amilcar, for that. Matthew, you sit in a very interesting position here, especially when you're among people who are on the ground, who are activists, who call themselves activists. I mean, you're the politician, and you're often perhaps perceived as the enemy of progress when we talk about issues related to climate. And by you, I mean, the group to which you belong. I'm curious, you talked a lot about coastal communities and the very specific threats posed to the near majority of the Jamaican population that lives on or close to coastal communities. What kinds of actions have you or your government taken so far that have yielded something that you think the rest of us could learn from?
So, strangely, I don't feel that foreign to the concept of being an activist. I was in environmental protests at 9 years old, protesting nuclear waste coming through the Caribbean Sea from us at primary school. So I understand the need for social activism, and I actually never take it personally when groups or individuals in Jamaica who feel very strongly about issues try to move policy much further along. The reality is, as Christian said, even activists who have usually, in many cases, a very strong academic background, so they understand the triple planetary crisis and the development issues from that academic standpoint. Invariably, they don't accept that they don't speak for the broader citizenry. In active and maturing democracies, whether we like it or not, it is the body politic who speaks for that broader citizenry, and it's why they're able to stay. So it doesn't make sense to chastise the body politic, but rather understand where the citizenry is. Because if you're not communicating in a way with respect to bring people along, you're not able to make the sorts of changes that you want with the best will in the world. The other thing that affects what you're able to do in all things is really your economic and fiscal space. So I mentioned the triple planetary crisis, and I mentioned the context that Jamaica finds itself in. It's a little different than much of the rest of the Caribbean at this moment. Now, we've had some economic gains over the last 12 or 13 years that have had us fare a little better than our neighbors and our brothers and sisters coming out of COVID. We're probably the only country in the region that hasn't seen an increase in debt, has historically low unemployment, and is seeing a V-shaped economic recovery. Now, recovering to where we were pre-COVID is still a very fragile position. That fragile position doesn't deal with the ravages that are to come from climate change, whether they're from the catastrophic Category 5 hurricanes or from the slow onset events that do affect you. And in many ways, those are the ones that I'm particularly wary of, the ones that, because of warming environment, deteriorating soil quality, as Amilcar mentioned, or generally rising sea levels or warming seas that affect your reefs, and remove the nature-based solutions that do give you some basic protection along the coast. So the truth is, the problems are significant. We are in an interesting space, but we still don't have the full capacity to ensure that we're able to adapt to the fact that the climate has already changed, and the way that our weather patterns have changed have already made it very difficult for us to thrive when we consider the how we developed, right? I mentioned we developed poorly. We didn't develop for the weather patterns to be the way they are now. I'm not sure we developed the way we were supposed to for the weather patterns 20 years ago, but it makes it that much worse now, and we're in a race against time. The reality is, when you can have rainfall one month, which is 11% of its 30-year average, and the very next month you can have a shower in an afternoon, which is 204% of your 30-day average, you see the sorts of problems you have. There's no drainage anywhere in the world built for that sort of erratic rainfall. There is no agricultural investment in the Caribbean that I've seen that is climate proof or ready for the erratic rainfall, the heating, the warming environment, the deteriorating pollinating rates. We have some real challenges, definitely within all of our territories, but specifically in our urban environments. In the Jamaican context for our deep urban environments, which affect 70% of the population, as I mentioned. First one is, how do we deal with the fact that we are on the front lines and we face the risk every hurricane season of catastrophe? Two things we've done which we're particularly proud of. One, we're the first country in the region to have a catastrophe bond funded by the World Bank with the premiums. So we are in a space based on our net reserves to be able to float the economy at its macro level should there be a supervening event. Large macro thing, not the type of thing that community activists feel on day one, but if we all think of all of the major storms that have affected all of our brothers and sisters, and the fact that in many cases they've lost a year or 2 years trying to get the economy restarted, we have actually put in a safety net, which we're proud of. The other major tool that we launched earlier this year, I affectionately call JSRAT. It is a Jamaica Systemic Risk Assessment tool. It is a tool funded by the GCF and IDB, designed by the University of Oxford and supported by the CCRI, which is doing a full analysis of all of our infrastructure in Jamaica. So it guides investments to make sure that they're investing in the weakest infrastructure to strengthen it, as well as private sector to invest in the least risky areas so that our economy is not constantly disrupted every time you have a climatic event. So those things are kind of macro, super level that wouldn't really get many points on the ground, but they're two very important things that we're particularly proud of. At the micro level, two things that are visible that constituents see and understand. There are 28 kilometers of coastline in the Kingston Harbor. Kingston Harbor is the 7th largest natural harbor in the world, and it is semi-closed, so there is some protection. But anyone who's ever been here during a hurricane can tell you that some protection feels negligible. We have to raise the level of our road network and our seawall network right across that 28 kilometers of road network. And as much as we've made financial gains, that hard infrastructure is going to cost us $10 million US per kilometer. Now we've done one. Debt-free, happy to have done it, sensible investment. But when you need to take out 280 million US dollars rather, out of your capital budget from building additional classrooms to take schools up, of shifts to deal with the long-standing issues in your health sector, to deal with debt payments, to deal with all the transportation issues that you have. You see the issue now. Why we're going to do that investment is because, in essence, it de-risks the private sector coming in behind that wall now to put in the new social infrastructure and the sensible modern urban buildings that allow for proper citizen interaction. But you can't expect that investment to come if you don't de-risk de-risk those future investments as a government. So we're making that plan. We're doing that in Montego Bay, we're doing that in Ocho Rios, we're doing that in Kingston. And as our capital budget increases going into next year's budget, which is April 1, we'll be able to do several more kilometers, and we're quite happy with that because it won't be debt related. The other thing now is the environmentalist in me and the tree hugger in me is that we're actively pursuing a mangrove restoration project right across our south coast. Our south coast has seen the greatest damage to our mangroves. Now you have a perfect confluence of factors that have really affected our mangrove health. You have poor sewage disposal, which we're in my water hat. We need $1 billion US to fix, but we're working and we have a major financing program to come that will involve some debt, some capital investment to deal with that issue. Solid waste, we've always been particularly bad at managing our solid waste. Solid waste, sewage, never treat mangroves well. Beyond that though, we have the triple disaster, not the triple planetary crisis, but the triple disaster coming from human intervention, because in many ways it's a source of excellent firewood. So along your southern coast, we have some of the poorest communities that we have in Jamaica. So it's been victim of the need for firewood. We have a lot of work to do to work with these communities to deal with the social issues. And as Christian would have said, without going and communicating in a manner that's not disrespectful, that is engaging, we'll never get there. But as Amilcar said, if we don't get into the communities and start to deal with these long-standing developmental issues, you also won't build the credibility that allows you to spend the fiscal space that we're developing. I think that's pretty much a mouthful, so I'll give a break there so that someone else can come in.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for that, Matthew. I think that really gives us a sense of what's the not just the problem, but what is actually being pursued in Jamaica. Milka, you wanted to jump in.
Yes, if I may, I think it's really good that Matthew provide the context there. And I think some people really need to appreciate, and not just the activists or politically, politics is always multi-scalar. It's sometimes we suffer from the position we are at and maybe feel locked out from one room or the other. But it always has the levels. And so the macro structural approach that Matthew was speaking to is fundamental, which is to understand. I remember sitting down next to colleagues, I was really just eating doubles, and some private sector investors from Trinidad and Tobago were thinking about St. Vincent. And the question they had is, well, if it have a volcano, what insurance will I get? And I laugh, like who would ever think about investment and thinking through what happens in the event of volcanic ash? And they were all genuinely scared about this event. Likewise, when young people buy homes in Trinidad and you go on a group, down there does flood? That's the first question you ask. And in fact, some real estate properties are seen as important and so on. And they advertise saying that this is not a flood area. Just to show you the space we have gone to as a society where we understand disaster risk all the time. And we put more money into trying to, and we make certain economic decisions around it. That said, in a very concrete way, when Hurricane Maria hit Dominica, we saw 226% GDP lost to the island. And then the diaspora has to play a very important role with remittances and economic recovery. So when Mia Motley is negotiating with the IMF and going at a global level, speaking on behalf of small island developing states, and she says, we have to use 1% of revenues from fossil fuels, which could end up building a fund of $70 billion per year to help countries on the climate front line, which is about a kind of green debt relief, very similar to what Matthew is speaking on with the catastrophe bond. That's very important because our government still has to manage the economy. There's only so much fiscal and policy space for work to happen. And if you think you could get environmental justice without some economic justice, I would tell you on the wrong side of the table. You need to have resources to invest in the infrastructure and so on. But it's a paradox, and this is where I'll go in. One of the things we need to let go of is trying to entrench ourselves further in a global economy, which always brings us into capital or environmental baseline too tightly connected to profit, or a form of neo-extractivism. We end up further entrenching ourselves in the economy, crossing our fingers, hoping the barrel of oil goes up, and then we still plundering the environment. And if a country could ever discover oil, a country that never thought they would have oil before, right? They have a dream maybe to get a visa back to the next country or to improve the geopolitical standing in the world, as we should, because as poor nations, it is always a hard choice. So the question is, what are the hard choices we want to make? All economies are in transition, but transition to what? What are the hard choices we want to make? And the hard choices I think we can make going forward. And that is why we need people involved with political parties, we need community activists, policymakers of conscience to guide us to an economic future and a society which is very clear about the centrality of the environment. It's not an environmental thing or 2 pages in a manifesto or what we do to an international convention, but a rethinking of justice in development itself.
And it sounds to me like what is at the heart of a lot of what is being said here is how all of this is communicated and broken down, and how it is made to relate to, again, the lived experiences of people, to their needs, their immediate needs, what we like to call the bread and butter issues. And climate change still for many people is a futuristic thing, except of course when there is an actual extreme weather event or crisis, and then that falls off eventually, so how do we get that communication? How do we reinforce the importance of everything that, Matthew has pointed out there is super important. He has an important role to play. When you talk about money, climate finance, that's a big part of ensuring we can adapt in the way that we need to. But how do we make that palatable, digestible to the people who need to understand it, so we can set about creating these more sustainable cities, communities, or just lifestyles? Christian, I don't know if you have any thoughts on how that communication happens among young people.
There is a new push towards environmental storytelling, where people tell their stories to kind of put a face on the climate crisis. Because I grew up hearing about the polar bears and the ice caps, but to be honest, like I'm kind of desensitized by it now. I'm much more moved by hearing stories of people who had to leave their villages because they ran out of water, they were in a drought, or things like that. We get those stories right here in the Caribbean when people have living through disaster events like Dorian in the Bahamas. Some of these stories I've heard after that are really gut-wrenching. And the elements of a good story I have found to be, it can be either scientific, it can be the emotional, personal base, or it could be both of them. So I think that we need to incorporate some elements of storytelling in communicating. And also I think that there is going to need to be a sacrifice on behalf of the people who are listening, because I don't think that scientific literacy is very common in the Caribbean, unfortunately. And being able to link the climate crisis to what we are experiencing now is going to take some level of scientific understanding. That's my input.
Matthew, what do you think of that, specifically as regards to science?
So I agree wholeheartedly on the need for environmental storytelling. I think we also don't need to overcomplicate it in regards to our people, or rather sell them short. I think you always need to give people credit and speak in the way that they understand, right? A farmer on a plot of land knows that he's yielding less per half acre than he was 30 years ago if he's using the same methodology, because he knows that somehow the weather pattern isn't the same. He knows because he works the field that it's a little hotter. He will understand. You just need to speak in a way that that brings it home to his reality. I think there's definitely need for that expertise in storytelling, though. I actually think that's perhaps more where we fall down than others. Our socio-cultural background as Caribbean citizens, we deal with a lot of trauma that we don't necessarily deal with particularly well. And we assume that everybody's perspective is the same as ours. So we don't debate very well. We don't necessarily look at varying perspectives very well. So that expertise in storytelling and, for want of a better term, marketing is definitely missing as we try to bring it home, the issues that we face. And the truth is, where I will agree with those who are not fans of the body politic, the body politic hasn't really done that need justice. You have had leaders in recent times who have done their best to bring it home, but one or two won't do it. The body politic has overpromised generally when it comes to election cycles without sharing with their citizenry what the real risks are that they face. And I think that has entrenched a bit of resistance to saying we need to make these deep investments into the things that will ensure we're still here in 30 years. So when I say to someone, this well that you're getting water from, which, yes, your grandmother used to get water from, your parents used to get water from, your children now get water from, I need to spend a lot of money on it because of saltwater intrusion, because of rising sea levels. It's not because there's some corrupt intent to spend money on something that is there. It's because if I don't spend the money now on that water, you will have the real effects of that drought. But if somebody turns on their pipe now and they have water now, well, why are you spending on new PVC pipes instead of old iron and asbestos pipes? I already have water, but I don't have the classroom that I need, but I don't have the hospital bed that I need. And I think that's where, as Caribbean leaders and thought leaders, because more important than the body politic or activists or academia, acknowledging that I think those on the call are indeed thought leaders. That's where we need to focus in terms of where are we going to spend our energy to bring our citizens along so that they understand the choices that are before us. Because I think if we give them the room to make the choices, invariably they make the right ones.
Thank you, Matthew. Amilcar, I'm keen to know a little bit more about how that communication exercise has worked for you in East Port of Spain. I feel like you've had some measure of success and you did note some encouraging things that you all have observed. What is that engagement like?
For sure. I mean, I don't have any high theory about living nice. I just know when it's nice, you need to, I always tell people that on my mother's side, my mother's from Fort Worth, Stamina. My father was from Lavantil. So Fort Worth, Stamina is a lot of cocoa estates, family of laborers and so on. And, I always feel like I leave the bush to go in more bush in East Port of Spain. People will be amazed to see the level is very similar to a peasantry in Lavantil, the views on the hill, the type of agricultural environment that it also has. But it is not tapped into, right? Those resources are not there. The knowledge, the stigma around the society has impacted people. So it forces us to have very direct conversation with people about their lives. One of our signature programs is something called the latrine eradication program. According to 2011 census, we have about 3,000 pit latrines throughout the Port of Spain. One of the first things we got as the coordinator for socioeconomic projects was to look at blending solar energy with our water management system to allow people to have an affordable unit for a toilet and washroom facility. People were already giving us gratitude for moving a latrine to a toilet. I've seen situations where people put bed sheets there when we go and do our site visits because the toilet we may have constructed and the washroom is more sophisticated and has a better structure than their household. So people have that, but as a state, it's not our job just to say we give all this something because they didn't have, but to even engineer and design something for the future, which requires a lot more resources, a lot more support, and even a lot more thinking in the design work. But those are the places we want to move towards. So living nice is a very natural thing. For me, I drew it from inspiration of Rastafari and the ITAL and Liberty. We have alternative modes, and that is what I try to encourage today. When we want to buen vivir, we want to live nice. It's not just about what we want as a political demand, but a lifestyle we can embrace from now, which shows that different lifestyle. So even our Dean, with the work that you and Fallon do with Roots Yard, eating vegan food, having collective action, reflecting on that. And even one day we could get our parliaments and so on to have outdoor meetings. I really think we could use our imagination to root people to foster connections to the environment. So I have no problem with having a parliamentary house. But it would be great if we had 3 parliaments. We had another one in Tobago. We have 2 airports. You could have 2 and 3 parliaments where we could carry on the business of the nation in different settings to acknowledge the different modes of being and the different ways politics could be organized in our society. That is important to me.
And I think that word reimagine has come up a few times recently for me in different spaces. And I think that's really what it speaks to when we talk about creating these sustainable spaces, whether it's in a more localized community or within a wider city context. I think it is about the power of our own imagination, like, how expansive we choose to see the potential for the spaces and for ourselves, and our contribution to those spaces. So it's time now to invite questions from our audience viewing online. Feel free to put your questions in the chat on any site you're watching us from right now. We have one here from Sheila McIntosh. She asks, what is the role of civil society in creating sustainable cities and communities? A real important question. Christian, do you want to take a stab at that?
Civil society is much closer to the ground than our ministries are, to say the bare truth. They are more likely to know what is needed and can bridge the gap to civil society can create a liaison between the ministries and the communities to determine what is needed. Anyone else?
No, I totally get what you're saying because, I mean, in many cases, civil society are implementers of government policy. I mean, NGOs play such a huge role in filling gaps, right? Matthew, what do you think about that, especially from where you sit? I'm sure you engage with civil society on a regular basis.
So civil society is a critical part of us delivering on the promise of democracy, right? There has to be reasonable access for citizen engagement. And invariably, because of the stage of development that we are, our government MDAs are simply not at a stage of maturity enough to function to provide the level of service that they need. So invariably, politicians, civil society, the church, and other organized citizen groups come in to bridge that gap. I have a very strange view on it, though. I acknowledge the absolute desperate need for it in the Caribbean now as it is, but I also view it as a state failure because it is a failure of the state being unable to connect with its citizens and provide the level of service and intervention that it needs to move our people to, in the Jamaican context, towards Vision 2030, in the broader global context, towards the SDGs. It's a acknowledgement of failure of your state agencies, not of a political party, of the state itself that 2-3 political parties should be investing in to make stronger. So it's something we absolutely need. I congratulate all of those who serve and work in that space. I work with civil society constantly, especially in the environmental side of things. But it's not something a government should feel good about. Similarly, because the citizens absolutely need that gap to be bridged, it's not something a government should try to shut out either. But governments, while working with civil society, have to create a parallel investment strategy to ensure that the capacity of the agencies matches the needs of the people. So basically, civil society shouldn't be dealing with literacy issues in 2030. They should be dealing with another issue that you haven't caught up to yet. They shouldn't be dealing with pit latrines. We have some of that issues certainly in rural and in deep urban Jamaica as well. But they shouldn't have to help with that in 2030. They should find a new cause to help us to push us to move further, not be having the same conversations with us that they were having 20, 30 years ago, because it does represent a systemic failure. So great civil society is important because we've had some systemic failure in the region.
That's an interesting take for sure. It reminds me of a perspective my colleague at the Cropper Foundation shares, which is that our goal as NGOs should be to work ourselves out of a job.
Agreed.
To move on, to solve problems and move on. Amilcar, what do you think?
Well, my focus or frame would be with the state. That's where I think where I would see it. It's really convening power. And the state brings people to the table and not necessarily has to be the chair all the time. So we often see state as a driver for social changes. And where I come from as an activist working in the public service, I see it as the state as a conduit for it, that could present certain complexities around serving a public in a particular dimension and mode. But the civil society and people and social groups and movements really have a role in playing with that. Now, we know that it's complex. People need to have trust, need to have legitimacy, they need to have confidence in the institution, and that is what we must work towards. But as an activist, I would like to make maybe a reflection on it. What I have seen is sometimes less focus on development work. We very issue-based sometimes, and because of the size of our institutions at times, we cannot take on the responsibilities to lead a more dynamic kind of transformation. So I would love to see where we could move civil society in this 21st century environment to see it as a place where we have people who work in NGOs all their life. In other countries, some people work in the NGO sector that deals very closely with international development, regional development, and local actions. And that means we need to build up resources, build up the financial structures of the work of civil society to feel like they don't need to be on good terms with a member of parliament or a certain official in the public service to sit at the table, get resources, which is their fundamental line item to fund all the other work that they do on a Christmas function or Diwali at the end of the year. So I would really love to see something more dynamic, independent, and robust. And that is the work that we play with activism. We have a little way to go. But I think when we have our independence, you would see a lot more autonomous civil society organization, a little bit more gusto in the work that we do, and maybe challenge even some of the issues that people call us hypocrites for.
We have a question here for Christian. Someone is asking, what are some of the barriers to sustainable, bikeable cities in TNT and the Caribbean?
Let's try to do a speed round instead of a whole speech. Funding, it might not be seen as big of a priority to allocate funding for. 2, planning. It's very difficult to retrofit cities that already exist. So the solutions that could be taken would be very simplistic, things that could be implemented immediately. 3, culture. We see cars as being aspirational. It is something to work towards, get a house, get a job, get a wife, get some kids, get a car, because it represents freedom. 4, crime. It's safer to be in a car than in a bike, because streets are unsafe now. We have a lot of crime going on, a lot of shootings and robberies. And I would close off by saying disasters. Especially now, so that we have the floodgate that was stolen in Port Spain that is opening the city up to more flooding, because fundamentally the SDG 11 is about safe transport, and it's no point using this mode of transport if it's not safe. And end of speech.
Thanks, Christian. And if no one else has anything to add to that, we do have another question. How can culture support the development of sustainable communities? And that's actually something I wanted to get to, because that's a big part of the SDG 11, right? When we talk about sustainable cities and communities, it's also considering heritage and culture. How do you all see that one? Matthew, you're in a good place to talk about that, I think.
So your culture in many ways is the heartbeat of a city, right? And we use the word culture, and it brings up different emotions and different thoughts, I'm sure, to every one of us on the meeting almost immediately. But it is the genuine heartbeat. It's how do your people feel about the space? How do they react to things? Why do we react that way? How do we express ourselves? How do we eat? How do we enjoy? How do we engage with entertainment? How do we show life? I mean, it's such a thrill to visit a new city, anywhere in the world. I mean, for all of the varying differences, whether it's as developed as New York, or I'm going up to the Steelban House in Port of Spain, or you're seeing a very different Nordic type city in Oslo, or you're seeing a Kigali in Rwanda. It's the culture that really creates this feeling. It's around that we've developed. So I think it's in many ways, certainly in the Caribbean context, the reason our development has been so chaotic of our urban centers is because of how traumatized we were. And that plays out in the culture and plays out in how we moved in and how we developed and how we laid out. There was safety in numbers, which is why people lived so close together, but then kept the yards around them empty. So, the safety issues brought on by a culture. The Caribbean, really doesn't have sort of high-rise global north view version of a city. It's really known by the cultural heartbeat of that city. So people come to a Kingston and St. Andrew to see the home of Bob Marley and to feel the reggae music. They go to a Trinidad to see Carnival and that sort of expression of color and excitement ahead of Easter. And that's the case right throughout the region. If you go to Latin America, you see it in Panama. If you go back even before Panama would have exploded because of the Panama Canal exploded, economically, you see their cultural lineage coming through their restaurants, through their entertainment, through their theater. I think it's something that in the region would really have to look to promote, look to preserve, and look to ensure that it evolves in a manner that doesn't leave your history behind, but also becomes more open, so it's more visible to to our friends to the north, and it can attract greater visitors and greater tourism revenue. The UN Habitat Program, as a part of the UN SDG 11, is an excellent blueprint, and I think roadmap. It perhaps bridges the gap with what I'm saying about civil society and what Amilcar was saying, and shows how you bring people together to really create that cultural exposition.
Matthew, thank you very much. We are pretty much near the end of our panel at this time. Amilcar and Christian, I don't know if you have any final thoughts you would like to share, not just on that question, but on anything related to sustainable cities and communities. Amilcar?
It's no problem. I think I would just leave with a prophetic message. What was unplanned must be planned. What was left behind must be put in front, and what was condemned to the margins must be made the center.
Give thanks. And Christian?
I more had a comment on what Matthew was saying, and that is that the most sustainable building is the ones that already exist. So there's benefit to taking care of the ones that we have already. But overall, it was a good panel.
Well, I want to thank you all, Matthew, Amilcar, Christian, for making the time to be here. Christian, I know you're joining us from a very different time zone, so we greatly appreciate the effort to just be present this evening. Thank you for your important reflections, all of you, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Yeah, and of course, all of our viewers, all those who sent questions, etc. Thank you so much for your participation. So we are getting ready for the next part of the evening, which has a lot to do with our awards. All right, so we are going to, I think for now, we're going to set you up with the finalists of the Very Short Shorts films, the mobile film competition, before we get into announcing our winners of this year's, of the 3 awards being presented this year. Stay with us.
You promised me to tell if there's anything haunting you. You leave without saying where you're going or where to. Yeah, I can never take away our story now. I can never take away our story now. We come too far to waste our story. It's our story now. Let's go.
What are the stories we hear every day and oftentimes neglect to notice? What are the conversations that our surroundings attempt to have with us? Production and consumption, preservation and progress. Tune into Soundscapes.
My own, I that greedy attitude. The life God want to tell was easier. If God to take them, how much fish and loaves, and share how much thousands of people.
Just because things looking bad now, that don't mean they have to stay that way. We can reclaim the affected environment. We here in TNT have so much we could do. Endless sun, wind, and wave that can be converted to power. Transition from today to a better tomorrow for all Trinbagonians.
It's been 2 years since the pandemic. Home gardening and eating what you grow became the norm. Making a nutrient-rich substrate helped reduce my carbon footprint, saving money and reducing my wastage. Composting capitalism and nurturing my mind into freedom. Reaching towards sustainable energy. Rainy days gave rise to new ideas. With the sun being so hot recently, utilizing solar energy on this project unlocks all of my creativity and resourcefulness. 1% of charge from solar energy means I have about 8 seconds to get one shot. It's inevitable that the current system of unchecked capitalism is going to end, and we are going to need something better to replace it. So I started with 1%.
There are 7.3 billion people in the world, but only 2.3 billion homes. An average home in the Western world ranges from 1,400 square foot to 2,500 square foot. That's huge. In Western countries, we continue to build huge homes only to implement sustainable afterthoughts. But what if the solution was always here? Tiny dwellings. Tiny dwellings promote community, have smaller energy footprints, and can be just as functional as large homes. In a tiny home, you can read, cook, work from home, and relax, just as in a large home. So we ask, why do we always scale up to then try to be more sustainable? Why not transition to smaller homes and tighter, more sustainable communities?
I am the litter bug. Instead of building facilities such as schools, healthcare, and proper housing, I prefer more factories so that I can get my brand name clothing on time. As sulfur dioxide makes its way into the air and dye coloring slowly flows into the river, contaminating aquatic life so that the future generation has no later use for consumption. My friends and I own bikes, but we rather use our vehicles. Instead of being an environmentalist, we made a decision not to carpool. as this serves as a mitigation method to release little amount of toxic gases such as carbon monoxide, thus preserving this thing all you like to call planet Earth. If you want to live in a world of transition, don't follow my toxic trait, because at the end of the day, I'm just an unscrupulous little bug.
Today at around 3:30 p.m., a truck would have passed by playing loud music, which caused the giraffes, which are within 100 feet of the road, to stampede. Zoo officials had to take emergency steps to calm them and bring the situation under control.
Social media has responded by saying, hold them and walk them. We jamming still. The city could burn down.
Effects of noise pollution causes hearing problems, psychological issues, physical problems such as headaches, high blood pressure, respiratory agitation, racing pulse, gastritis, colitis, and even heart attacks. This pollution also causes cognitive issues and behavioral changes that affects memory and dulls the mind.
All right, folks, we are back to the second part of this closing night event, and it's a very exciting part this evening. It's the awards. I mean, what would a film festival be without any awards, right? And so now in its fifth year, we have the awards for this year's edition of the Very Short ShortsMobile film competition, and you just saw there the films from the 8 finalists and 2 international finalists. And so we are getting ready for those presentations. I just want to get a sense from those of us joining online, all of the participants, the finalists joining us online. It would just be great to hear from you. Just maybe do a little round robin to hear how you all are feeling this evening. feel free to put on your mics at this time and just jump in. Benny, Ben, Kevin, Volney,
Hi, good night.
Jamie, Danique,
Greetings, everybody.
Corey. Yeah,
Hi,
let me
everyone.
hear how y'all feeling.
Greetings, grateful to be here, grateful to be participating, beautiful to see everybody's work, happy to be amongst the talent and the brilliance. Thank you. Ardeen, you look beautiful.
Oh. I had a little wardrobe change for the awards. Sorry, Benny, you were saying?
No, I heard the A, so I heard Ardeen, but I heard a Benny, so I said, oh, thank you. But all of us look beautiful tonight, so.
Oh.
Thank you. You all look beautiful.
Great. Corey, anything? Kevin?
No, I just was, glad to see, so many filmmakers from the Caribbean and not just the Caribbean anymore, submitting stuff.
And on that note, maybe we should have Ben say something.
Hello. Thank you for having us. This is the director, I'm the writer and actor.
Hello, feeling very inspired by all the creativity of everyone's films.
Fantastic. Lovely of you all to join us. Corey, we haven't heard you yet.
Yeah, I found it was cool that we all just sat down and watched it. I was looking at everybody's reactions while we were watching the film, so it's cool.
Yeah, that's the one cool thing about Zoom, I suppose.
Yeah.
Volney?
Yeah, man, just want to say big up to everybody. And yeah, man, it's a pleasure to, be here and be creating with you all and just this whole experience. So yeah, man, just bless up and big up on yourself, for real.
Excellent. And to our viewing audience joining us from home, mostly, I suppose, on YouTube, on Facebook, thank you all again for staying the course with us. We are sort of winding down, but also building up the excitement, right? Because we're getting ready for the first presentation. That's the Youth Jury Award, the sponsor of which is Atlantic LNG. And representing Atlantic this evening to announce the winner in that category, we have Mr. Sean Garcia, who is the manager of carbon abatement.
Thank you. Good evening, good night, maybe good morning, depending on which part of the world you are, to the viewing audience. As gracefully introduced, I am Sean Garcia. I am the manager for carbon abatement. And on behalf of Atlantic, we are definitely pleased to sponsor this year's festival and the prize for Youth Jury winner. As you would have seen in the Wilman film, our youth and the young people definitely have the power to enact positive, sustainable change within their communities and nationally. And at Atlantic, we remain committed to the development of our nation's youth, so they too may write their own stories. So on behalf of all of us at Atlantic, it is my pleasure to extend congratulations to the youth jury winner of Green Screen's Very Short Shorts Mobile Film Competition 2022, Riyad Rahman.
With us this evening, apparently he's not here, right? No, he isn't, as far as I know, unfortunately. But congratulations to Riyad. We were hoping to have a word with him to get his reaction to that win, but I understand he is traveling, he is abroad, and so he can't join us, he can't be here. But congratulations to Riyad and anybody connected to Riyad who may be tuning in for this special announcement this evening. And thank you so much to Atlantic LNG for supporting youth in film, and particularly around messaging that relates to sustainability. And of course, the theme for this year's competition being transition. All right, so we are on now to the second award, which is the People's Choice Award, sponsored by SWMCOL. And unfortunately, so previously we didn't have the winner. This time we don't have the sponsor. Unfortunately, we don't have anyone here representing SWMCOL this evening. They could not be here, very unfortunately. And so I will have the honor, I suppose, of presenting or announcing that award. And this award, as we mentioned, is People's Choice. This means this is the vote of the people, the many people who saw your films over the course of the festival and who decided that, you deserve this win. So again, courtesy SWMCOL, the winners of this year's People's Choice Award, I have to say, are Corey Latapy and Olajuwon Scott, right? And their film is called Transition Tiny Homes. And Corey, I know you're here with us. Congratulations. I feel like you should all turn on your mics and clap so that way he can hear. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Well,
Huge congratulations.
Very good work.
How are you feeling? You have to turn on your mic.
Oh, my bad. Apologies. I said thank you very much, guys. I feel great.
Yeah, are you surprised?
Am I surprised? I'm not sure. I tried to rally a lot of support from my friends and family.
Well, clearly your friends love you, Corey.
Yeah, I thank them very much. I really ask everyone to tune in and watch the film and watch all the films in the festival and to vote as well. So I'm really glad that they did that.
Can you tell us anything about making this film that struck you, that will stay with you, that you yourself are now inspired by in terms of the issue of transition and just sustainability and our current situation as regards climate change, etc.?
I think, well, one thing about making the film itself was it was a great learning experience. Like I've actually wanted to enter the very ShortsMobile competition for quite some time, and I'm really happy that I got the opportunity to do it this year.
So
And
this
then
is your
also,
first year.
yeah, this is my first time.
Wow, look at
Yeah.
you.
And then also there in terms of transition, and the subject that we chose of sustainability, like it's a concept that's always been on my mind. And like we build like very large homes or homes that I think are sometimes greater than the size that we need for the people that live in them. And then like we implement like sustainable things. So we put like solar panels or bulbs to reduce the electricity consumption, or like meters to reduce the flow of the water. So like we build these grander homes and then put like these sustainability things in them. And so like my question really is like, why not just build like homes that are inherently sustainable? And that's because I really like the concept of like these tiny cabin-like homes, and not tiny, but sufficient and well laid out. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Corey, for that. Thank you for sharing that story with us. And I think you've given us something to think about. I think especially where in the Caribbean, it's a big deal for us to not just own our own homes, but, we place a lot of emphasis on having, a
And
grand
home
home,
ownership.
as grand as possible,
Yeah.
And that requires a lot of energy,
Yeah.
especially when we have to account for all these AC units. So
Yeah.
definitely. Thank you so much, Corey, and to your partner in this initiative, Olajuwon Scott. Sorry he couldn't be here with us, but congratulations again to you both.
Okay, thank you very much.
And again, that award, People's Choice Award, is courtesy SWMCOL. And we're on now to the moment of the evening, the biggest moment of the evening, where we announce the overall jury award, which is valued at $12,000 TT. I should have mentioned that earlier as well, that we do have the value of the other awards, which I will get back to. But so our VSS Overall Jury Award is, of course, courtesy our main sponsor of the Green Screen Environmental Film Festival, which is the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago. And we actually have with us Mr. Mario Singh, who is the Assistant Manager for Sustainability, with us to make that announcement.
Good evening, good night, everyone. It's a tremendous pleasure to be here. On behalf of the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited, I extend hearty congratulations to the overall jury winner of Green Screen's very shorts mobile film competition. Drum roll. And the winner is Von Lee Smith for his film 1%.
Congrats, Von Lee.
So
So
like it's unanimous here that that's well deserved.
A bit of a lag.
I just want to first off, I just want to thank the Most High, and I just want to shout out Olivia Stevens, who helped me and was supporting me on this film, and thank you also Green Screen for giving a platform for not only myself but everybody here to create and talk about something that's so important to what we're facing and everything right now. And thank you. This is my first time really. I'm Trinidadian, and my first time back here for such a long time, and just creating here, and it's been a journey thus far. So just thank you very much. Thank you, Mario, as well, for the announcement, everything, and bless it and big up to everybody as well too. I feel like this is a competition and everything, but it's like we're competing for like the right things to spread awareness, to put things about our planet and talk about things that are very important. So big up to everybody as well, so yeah, man, bless up.
Vonley, can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to create your film, 1%?
Okay, so the idea really stemmed from just looking at energy of the imagination, and looking at if we just put 1%, if we take 1% of our imagination and fuel it into something creative or something that's dealing with sustainability, something dealing with our environment, that's just really the idea behind it. But also is kind of about like taking back that power from like the 1% that run the country, and run the world. The playing with that concept is just kind of like taking back that power and knowing that we ourselves have it. And if we put 1% into talking about the environment, or healing ourselves, or our mental health, or anything around that nature, it could really produce a lot of results. So that's just really like the idea. And as it pertains to the film, it was just a kind of what would using 1% of the solar or the energy of the sun, or just that concept, I'm bringing it home, is very powerful, because 1% can go a long way. And if all of us, we all put a lot of percent or a lot of our energy into the films we create, and we don't know, like, this impact could, it can impact a lot of things and empower ourselves. So the idea was just playing with that 1% concept, and just going on the renewable energy with solar and everything,
Thank you so much, Vonley, and again, warm congratulations to you. I think it's so significant that we have two of our first-time filmmakers winning their categories. Vonley, of course, you're winning the overall, and Corey, the People's Choice Award. And I did promise to give the value of those prizes, and we have them. And the Youth Jury Award is valued at $5,000 TT, and again, that's sponsored by Atlantic LNG. And the People's Choice Award, courtesy SWMCOL, is valued at $3,000 TT. So again, congratulations to all our winners this evening, and to all our finalists for making it this far, and of course to all those who submitted films in this year's VSS Mobile competition, film competition. We know there'll be another edition next year, so look out for that. And we hope that not just because you've won this year, you won't enter again next year, right? You're very free to do that, as far as I understand. I don't think there are any rules prohibiting you. So we'd love to see what you come back with next year, folks, all of you. We look forward to seeing what you do with 1 minute in terms of your presentations on environmental issues and issues of sustainability. So congratulations to everyone. And I want to big up the sponsors who make this possible every year, particularly, again, the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, main sponsor of the Caribbean's only environmental film festival, valued at $12,000 TT. Atlantic LNG for their sponsorship of the Youth Jury Award this year. And again, this is really with a special outreach to the young people, who are interested in film and who are moved to tell stories, to use this platform to do that with, only a positive outcome at the end, which is that we can sensitize a wider population on issues that affect us all. And of course, the SWMCOL, the Solid Waste Management Company, for their continued support for the festival and their sponsorship of the People's Choice Award. So again, thank you so much. That brings us to the end of closing night, but I should let you know before we leave that this is not really the end of the festival. So we say closing night, but there's still a few more things happening. And I want to encourage you to go to the greenscreen.film website, where you can learn more about the East Yard event happening in 2 weeks from now, and also a panel discussion coming up next week, or this week, at the end of this week. So look out for that, folks. Lots more. We're going to keep the conversation going here at Green Screen. And again, look out for the announcement of the opening of the VSS Mobile Film Competition in 2023. So that brings us to the end. We're going to bring the curtains down now on the 2022 edition of Green Screen. Folks, again, it's been a pleasure to be here with you. My name again is Ardeen Serju, and I think we leave it there for this evening. Go out and continue telling your stories and continue sharing the really good stories about what's taking place. I mean, some of them are not that good, but they are important stories that need to be told, and continue to support that work as much as you can, wherever you can. Thank you again on behalf of Green Screen.